The clink of silverware stopped when the boy began to cry. At the center of a candlelit restaurant sat Daniel Cross, a billionaire CEO known for closing deals with a single look. Across from him, his 8-year-old son, Ethan, pushed his plate away, tears spilling silently as the room pretended not to notice. Daniel felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the same helpless feeling he'd carried since his wife passed away. No matter how many awards lined his office, he couldn't reach his own child. "Eat, buddy," Daniel said softly, forcing a calm smile. Ethan shook his head, eyes fixed on the table. The noise of the restaurant rushed back in, but Daniel heard only the quiet failure of another evening slipping away. Then a small voice cut through the air. "He's not sad about the food." Daniel looked up. A little girl stood near their table, no older than 9, holding her mother's hand. She wore a simple dress and had eyes far too thoughtful for her age. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, surprised. "What did you say?" The girl leaned closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret meant only for him. "He's missing someone. When my dad cries like that, it's because he doesn't know how to say it." The words landed harder than any boardroom confrontation. Daniel froze. Ethan's shoulders trembled, then stilled, as if someone had finally named the pain he couldn't explain. The girl smiled gently at Ethan. "It helps when someone listens without fixing things," she whispered. Before Daniel could respond, the girl was pulled back by her mother, disappearing into the crowd. But the air between father and son had changed. Daniel reached across the table and took Ethan's hand. For the first time that night, Ethan didn't pull away. And Daniel realized that sometimes, the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. Daniel didn't let go of Ethan's hand when the waiter returned. For once, the food didn't matter. "Do you want to tell me about it?" Daniel asked quietly. Ethan hesitated, then whispered, "Everyone talks to me like I'm okay, but I'm not." His voice cracked. "Mom used to sit right here." Daniel's breath caught. He had avoided this, afraid that talking about her would reopen wounds. But he finally understood. The wound never closed because they never touched it. "I miss her too," Daniel admitted, his voice unsteady. "Every day." Ethan looked up, surprised. "You do?" Daniel nodded. "I just thought I had to be strong all the time." Ethan squeezed his hand, as if the roles had reversed. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore, it was honest. Across the room, Daniel spotted the little girl again, now seated with her family. She laughed softly, unaware of the shift she had caused. Daniel felt something unfamiliar rise inside him, gratitude mixed with humility. When dinner ended, Daniel stood and approached the girl's table. "Excuse me," he said kindly. "I wanted to thank you." The girl tilted her head. "For what?" "For reminding me how to be a dad," Daniel replied. She shrugged with a small smile. "My grandma says grown-ups forget important things." Daniel laughed, a real laugh, and placed a handwritten note beside her plate. Her mother glanced down, eyes widening as she read the generous tip and a simple message, "Thank you for your kindness." As Daniel and Ethan walked out hand in hand, Ethan looked up at him. "Can we talk about Mom more, even when it hurts?" Daniel nodded. "As much as you want." That night, Daniel realized success wasn't measured in profits or power, but in moments of connection you almost miss. And sometimes, healing begins with a whisper. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The city glowed outside his penthouse windows, but his mind kept returning to the little girl's words. It helps when someone listens without fixing things. He had built an empire on fixing problems, yet the most important one at home had never needed a solution, only presence. The next morning, Daniel did something unthinkable. He canceled his first board meeting in 15 years. Instead, he knocked on Ethan's bedroom door. "School can wait an hour," he said. "How about pancakes?" Ethan blinked in disbelief. "You're serious?" Daniel smiled. "Completely." They cooked together, flour dusting the counter, laughter replacing the silence that once filled the apartment. Between flipped pancakes and spilled syrup, Ethan began sharing memories. His mom singing off-key, her silly dances in the kitchen. Daniel listened without interrupting, without correcting, without running. Later that day, Daniel asked Ethan a question he never dared to ask before. "Do you feel lonely?" Ethan nodded. "Even when people are around?" Daniel felt the weight of that truth. Ethan had grown up surrounded by luxury but starved of connection. That afternoon, Daniel drove them to a small park instead of the office. As Ethan played, Daniel noticed a familiar face on a nearby bench. The little girl. She sat beside her grandmother, feeding crumbs to pigeons. Daniel hesitated, then approached. "You again," he said gently. She smiled. "Hi, sir. I never caught your name." "Lily," she replied. Daniel knelt to her level. "Lily, do you know how brave you were that night?" She frowned. "I was just telling the truth." Daniel nodded slowly. "Exactly." As Ethan joined them, Lily waved. "Did talking help?" she asked. Ethan smiled, small, but real. "Yeah. It did." Lily's grandmother watched quietly, eyes warm. "Children notice what adults ignore," she said softly. Daniel stood there, humbled. Because in 3 days, his life had shifted, not from a deal or D. Days turned into weeks, and something inside the Cross household changed. Daniel started coming home before sunset. Phones stayed off during dinner. Some nights they talked about Ethan's mom. Other nights, they said nothing at all, and that was okay too. The silence no longer felt empty. One evening, as they walked through the same restaurant district, Ethan slowed his steps. "Can we eat there again?" he asked, pointing to the place where everything had begun. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Inside, the lights were just as warm, the music just as soft. But Ethan didn't cry this time. Instead, he scanned the room. "Do you think Lily will be here?" he asked. "I don't know," Daniel said. "But we can still be thankful." Halfway through the meal, Ethan stood up. Daniel panicked, until Ethan walked toward a nearby table where a man sat alone, shoulders slumped, untouched food in front of him. Ethan stopped and said quietly, "You don't have to eat if you're sad." The man looked up, startled. "My mom used to say it helps when someone listens," Ethan continued, voice shaking but brave. "You can miss someone and still be okay." The man's eyes filled with tears. He nodded, unable to speak. Daniel watched from a distance, heart pounding. In that moment, he saw it clearly. Kindness had moved through his son, multiplied, and passed on. When Ethan returned, Daniel pulled him into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. As they prepared to leave, a waitress approached. "Sir," she said softly, "that man just paid for everyone's meals. He said a little boy reminded him why he shouldn't give up." Daniel felt his throat tighten. Outside, Ethan looked up at him. "Dad, do you think Mom saw that?" Daniel knelt and held his son's face. "I think she started it." Under the city lights, Daniel understood something profound. Kindness doesn't end where it begins. It echoes, quietly, powerfully, changing lives in ways we may never fully see. Months later, Daniel sat in the back row of a small school auditorium, his tie loosened, heart full. On stage, Ethan stood under bright lights, gripping a microphone with nervous hands. The school had invited students to speak about someone who changed their life. Daniel hadn't known who Ethan would choose. Then Ethan began. "There was a time I thought being quiet meant being strong," he said. "But I learned that talking about pain doesn't make you weak." Daniel's eyes burned. Ethan continued. "A girl I didn't even know helped my dad listen to me. And my dad helped me learn how to listen to others." The audience sat in silence. "So now," Ethan said, smiling shyly, "when I see someone hurting, I try to be brave like she was." Applause filled the room, but Daniel barely heard it. He saw only his son, no longer lost, no longer alone. After the assembly, Daniel and Ethan walked outside together. The air was crisp, the sky wide and open. "Dad?" Ethan asked. "Do you think Lily knows what she started?" Daniel smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe she just did what felt right." Later that week, Daniel launched a quiet foundation, no press, no speeches, focused on teaching children emotional awareness and kindness. He named it the Whisper Project. At its first event, Daniel spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Lily stood beside her grandmother. Their eyes met. She waved. Daniel waved back, humbled all over again. He finally understood what true leadership looked like. Not being the loudest voice in the room, but being the one who listens. Because sometimes, a single whisper, spoken with kindness, can change everything forever.